Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Israel Brief, brought to you by Lay of the Lead. I'm Rolene Marks, and we do this every Monday to Thursday, and we'll tell you in a second where you can find our social media. But let's take a look at those top stories making important headlines. And it was one of the most controversial moments during Operation Guardians of the Wall, or Mivtza Shomer Chomot, as it's called in Hebrew here. And that was the bombing of the media house that housed Al Jazeera and Associated Press. This was a move that got Israel a lot of criticism, especially in the media. But the truth always out, and when the army is ready to divulge information, they do so. And they did so yesterday by releasing a statement why they specifically targeted this building. And it turns out that the Al Jala building was a very, very important military target for Hamas. This is where they house their R&D. This is where they embarked on attempts to disrupt the Iron Dome systems. What they wanted to do was overwhelm the Iron Dome systems, which would have put hundreds of thousands of Israelis in grave danger. Now, the IDF announced that in compliance with international law, because every strike that is conducted by the Israel Defense Forces goes through a very, very careful vetting process with the military advocate general, which look at how it fits into international law and the international laws of engagement. Civilians in the building were also given an hour or so to evacuate, and they were evacuated safely without any harm or any injuries, and absolutely no casualties. And the building was then razed. Yesterday, Israel's ambassador to the United States, who also happens to be our ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, met with Chris Pruitt, he's the CEO of Associated Press, and explained exactly why Israel hit the target that it did. And we must also just remember that the IDF is a military organization, and even though news agencies have been baying for evidence and information, we still have to remember that this was a state of war and that any vital intelligence will not be shared. In other news, German publication Die Bild released a study embarked upon by the EU Council, the European Union Council, who took on years of research into the content of Palestinian textbooks. Now, this is an issue that Israel and the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs in particular have raised with the EU Council and various European Union countries to say that you have to look at what is contained in textbooks. They are contra to the UNESCO mandatory principles which speak about conciliation and education. And in these textbooks, EU researchers found a gross amount of anti-Semitism, a lack of recognition of Israel's existence. In fact, it does not recognize the existence of the state of Israel as well, and endorses violence as a way to attain whatever nationalistic needs they want. Now, remember that this is taught to Palestinian children from very early on in their lives, right until they graduate high school. And while many blame various policies of Israel for the stalling of the peace process, it has been said by various Israeli officials that incitement of hatred, which is very evidenced in these textbooks, is one of the major obstacles, if not the major obstacles, to peace in the region. In fact, with the signing of the Abraham Accords, we have seen Gulf states really make a concerted effort to ensure that what is contained in their textbook speaks of peace, speaks of reconciliation, and not the incitement of hatred that we see in Palestinian textbooks. And our last story of the day, can you believe we haven't spoken coalition, but no major changes since yesterday. It takes us back to that highly controversial march. Yesterday, when we last spoke, the Security Cabinet at a very high level were meeting to discuss what to do with this march. However, it was announced that it is most likely to take place on June the 15th, days after the coalition government is sworn in the Knesset, pending police approval. Now, original organizers wanted to take place on the original route, which includes the Muslim Quarter. This could be quite provocative and is unlikely to get the nod from the police. So we will be watching the negotiations carefully to see whether or not this in fact goes ahead. So these are your top stories making headlines today. Don't forget to check out our content online at our webpage at www.layoftheland.online, on Facebook at Lottle Site. Give us a like, give us a share, give us a follow. We have a story up there on how an organization in South Africa is helping to end period poverty for young women and girls in impoverished areas. What are we talking about? Go see for yourself. We're also on Twitter because that's where everybody is, and you can find us at Lay of the Land 5 and also on our YouTube channel at The Israel Brief. So with the Wednesday Hump Day edition of The Israel Brief, and just a day before we head into the weekend, I'm wishing you a safe and healthy rest of your day, and we'll see you again tomorrow with the latest headlines.